Good afternoon, everyone. We are the Group 3 that will discuss Chapter 7, Framework and Principles of Moral Disposition. My name is Kathleen Kayla Cabus from BPED 1-5. As I start, the three Oriental sage, Buddha, Lao Tzu, and Confucius believe that human beings are one with the universal reality, the summum bonum, the Brahma, until the birth of human to the Atman self. The summum bonum is the highest or ultimate end. All human action is directed. The Brahma is the creator, the supreme existence or absolute reality. And the Atman self is the self-existent. Sabi din dito, thus human is always miserable due to selfish or innate desires leading to frustration and restlessness. As a human, hindi natin may pagkakaila that we all have a desires. Sometimes we tend to control things, but then when things seems to be uncontrollable or when things doesn't go on our way, we felt so frustrated and we felt so restless. We felt so disappointed. That is why napaka-importante that we need to trust the all-knowing God. Sabi nga, that many are the plans in a man's heart, but God's purpose shall prevail.
Good day, my name is John Mark Batis and I'm going to report Greek triumvirate. And they are the big three of Greek philosophy, namely Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. First, we have Socrates. To Socrates, happiness is acquired upon the good life, contemplated and discerned to have its real world. Socrates asserted that a well-examined life is one that is worth living for. This is the first piece of philosophy in the West to discuss the concept of happiness, but it is not merely of historical interest. Rather, Socrates presents an argument as to what happiness is that is as powerful today as when he first discussed it over 2,400 years ago. Basically, Socrates is concerned to establish two main points. The first one is happiness is what all people desire, since it is always the end or goal of our activities. It is an unconditional good. The second one is happiness does not depend on external things, but rather on how those things are used. A wise person will use money in the right way in order to make his life better. An ignorant person will be wasteful and use money poorly and end up being worse than before. Hence, we cannot say that money by itself will make one happy. Money is a conditional good, only good when it is in the hands of a wise person. This same argument can be deployed for any external good, any possessions, any qualities, even good looks or abilities. A handsome person, for example, can become vain and manipulative and hence misuse his physical gifts. Similarly, an intelligent person can be an even worse criminal than an unintelligent one. The second one, we have Plato. He believed that human is exiled and imprisoned in the body as punishment for sin. Self-liberation can be achieved through constant meditation and imitation of the former perfect self. Plato viewed human beings as inherently rational, social souls burdened by imprisonment within their physical bodies. The sole disposition of an individual soul, fixed for eternity, determines the type of human the individual will be in life. The human body, limited and constantly responding to need, is an obstacle to the soul's full realization. The third one, we have Aristotle. He added that to attain true happiness, human has to live a virtuous life by practicing and living a life of virtue. He regarded virtue as necessary for a person to be happy. For him, achieving virtue involves asking the question, how should I be, rather than what should I do. A fully virtuous person is described as achieving eudaimonia, and therefore would be undeniably happy. Eudaimonia is referring to happiness. For Aristotle, happiness is not a feeling. It is a quality of one's life as a whole and even beyond, made up by one's own work and resources and even beyond. Next is virtue ethics. Virtue ethics is an approach to ethics that focuses on character rather than actions. The key question is something like, what does the life well lived look like? The answer to such a question will naturally take the form of looking at characters, real-life role models, well-fleshed-out characters from good literature, or a posited ideal character. What are the traits that a person who is living the good or ethical life have? These are the virtues. Next is Aristotle. He presented that human beings present earthly existence is a composite nature of body and soul, mind and matter, sense and the intellect, fashion and reason. Aristotle characterized human beings as rational animals. That takes a bit of unpacking. However, rational in this case means being able to choose the most suitable ends for oneself, deliberating on the best means of achieving that end, and being able to develop those means. Before we start thinking that Aristotle thought that to be human was to act by reason alone, he saw human rationality being built on top of our sensitive nature, our feelings, sensations, and emotions, and the basics of being alive. For example, the ability to seek and take in nourishment and etc. Next is Aristotle's concept of telos. Well, for me, it is the end goal, but otherwise stated our purpose. For most of us, it is the work we do. It's about the satisfaction of seeing the results of our God-given talents being applied to a task, no matter how small. Humans are not meant to be idle. We are rewarded with crucial validation when we see the results of work we do and progress made towards goals.
Hello, good day. My name is Alvin Mahon from BPED 1-5. And for today's video, I am going to discuss the two kinds of ends and virtue as a habit, happiness as a virtue, and the principle of moderation. So first, let me discuss the two kinds of ends, which is the instrumental ends and intrinsic end. So what is the instrumental end? Instrumental ends are actions done as means to another end, like schooling and earning a degree. So yung instrumental end nga ay yung mga kilos na ginagawa natin bilang isang paraan para sa iba pang mga layunin. Halimbawa na lamang ngayong ginagawa natin pag-aaral. So, nag-aaral tayo upang makatapos at upang makakuha ng stable na trabaho. Nang sa ganun magawa natin yung pinaka-goal natin. Halimbawa nga yung goal natin na matulungan yung pamilya natin. Siguro kaya siya tinawag na instrumental end dahil yung action na ginagawa natin na yun yung nagiging instrumento para magawa natin yung layunin natin. So next is the intrinsic end. What is intrinsic end? Intrinsic end is the actions that are committed for their own sake, like being a student, teacher, or a doctor. So kung sa instrumental end nga ay gumagawa tayo ng kilos bilang paraan para sa iba pang layunin, sa intrinsic end naman ay gumagawa tayo ng kilos para sa sarili lang nating kapakanan. So yun yung pinagkaiba nila. Next is the virtue as a habit. Aristotle made it clear life of virtue can be achieved through constant contemplation of the good or happiness, doing good constantly and habitually. So dito nga sinabi ni Aristotle na maaari natin makamit yung buhay ng kabutihan kung lagi o patuloy tayong gagawa ng kabutihan o ng kaligayahan. Kung ang paggawa ng kabutihan ay ating maagawi maging hobby natin, maaari tayong mabuhay din sa kabutihan. Aristotle also believed that virtue as a habit requires an intentional choice when you begin. The habit of virtue is not yet developed, but over time, one becomes used to behaving virtuously, and after a while, one acts virtuously without needing to use volition. So next is the happiness as a virtue. Happiness is the manifestation of good life. A well-ordered, one guided and live in accordance with reason. It is the fruit of virtuous living, the constant and proper exercise of reason in all humans' action and endeavors. So sinasabi nga dito na kaligayahan daw ay ang pagpapakita ng isang magandang buhay. So kung pananatilihin natin ng pagiging masaya ay mapapakita natin na tayo ay mayroong magandang buhay. Sinabi rin ni Aristotle na ang happiness is consist in achieving through the course of a whole lifetime all the goods, health, wealth, knowledge, friends, and etc. that leads to the human nature and to the enrichment of human life. Last is the principle of moderation. That a good and happy life follows when lived in consonance with reason, meaning within the rational bounds which lie between two vicious extremes. Anything done extremely or insufficiently becomes unreasonable, improper, and irrational. Example is eating. So, ang ibig sabihin naman nito ay ang anuman daw bagay na ginawa ng labis o kulang ay nagiging hindi makatwiran at wasto. So, dito nga, iniisip ni Aristotle na ang katamtaman ay paraan para makamit ang kaligayahan. Sinabi din niya na ang virtue o ethics ay ang katamtaman sa pagitan ng labis at kakulangan. Aristotle also believes that every mood has a certain level which more or less than that what is a vice. But that mood in itself is a virtue. So that's all, and thank you.
My name is Jerome Pare. Here's my report. Saint Thomas Aquinas. He was born sometime between 1224 and 1226 in Rocaseca, Italy, near Naples. Thomas' family was fairly well-to-do, owning a castle. One of the 9 children, Thomas was the youngest of 4 boys. Thomas Aquinas was an Italian Dominican friar and priest who was an immensely influential philosopher, theologian, and jurist in the tradition of scholarly teaching. Aquinas followed Aristotle. Si Aquinas, he followed the way of thinking of Aristotle na ang pagkilos ng tama at masama ay nakadepende kung ito ba ay may naitutulong o ito ba ay humahadlang sa layunin ng isang tao. And the telos is eudaimonia or happiness, where happiness is understood in terms of completion, perfection, or well-being. Achieving happiness, mangangailangan daw ng range of intellectual and moral virtues na nagbibigay daan sa atin upang maunawaan ang nature of happiness and motivate us to seek in a reliable and consistent. And naniniwala si Aquinas na that the final happiness consists in beatitude or supernatural union with God. And he also believed that we inherited a propensity to sin from our first parent, Adam. And next is transcript of Saint Thomas Aquinas' definition of law. Saint Thomas Aquinas defined just law as an ordinance of reason and promulgated by the competent authority for the sake of common good One is, a just law is an ordinance of reason. Una dyan is reasonable. Reasonable is dapat mag-ingat at seryosong deliberasyon ng mga salita o dahilan. And permanent is binding and relevant for a long time period, and flexible means it is considerate to some exemption. 2 is, a just law is properly promulgated. Dito naman is dapat malinaw itong maipahayag o maipaalam sa lahat ng mga taong kinauukulan. 3 is, a just law must be decreed by competent authority. Ang mga taong lehitimong otoridad lang ang may kakayahang magpatupad ng mga batas sa kanilang lugar. And 4 is, a just law ought to be for the sake of common good. Dito, pinapalagay ang mga pagtataguyod at paggalang sa dignidad at kalayaan ng bawat tao. And dapat nito mapabilis ang panlipunang kalagayan at tunay na pag-unlad ng komunidad, at dapat itong magsulong ng tunay at pangmatagalang kapayapaan.
Magandang araw sa ating lahat. Ako po si Piolo Christian Lago ng BPED 1-5. Dumako naman tayo sa St. Thomas and Natural Law. Natural law is a system of law based on a close observation of human nature and based on values intrinsic to human nature that can be deducted and applied independently of positive law. The natural law governs the natural course of everything. Plants grow as what is supposed to be as plant. Animal acts as they are natural designed. This means that our creation follows its nature. As to humans, they are bound to follow the natural moral law. St. Thomas Aquinas' cardinal virtues. There are 4 cardinal virtues, which are the prudence, temperance, courage, and justice. Prudence is right reason in action. This moral virtue governs other virtues because it guides them by setting rule and measure. Ito ay isang proseso ng paggawa ng desisyon o umaasikaso sa mga implikasyon at kahinatnan ng isang aksyon o pagpili. Ipinapakita ang tamang pagpili sa isang aksyon at kung anong ikalalabasan nito. Temperance. Temperance is the virtue which moderates in us to an inordinate desire for sensible pleasure, keeping it within the limits assigned by reason and faith. Ang temperance naman ay ang pagtitimpi sa mga bagay na nais nating gawin, ngunit hindi naman masyadong importante. Halimbawa nito ay ang pagtitimpi sa pag-inom or pag-iiwas sa pag-inom. Courage. Courage is a virtue that is primarily impressed by endurance while faced to the fear of death for the sake of goodness. Courage is the resolve to act virtuously, especially when it is most difficult. Yung courage ay ang lakas ng loob natin para gumawa ng mga bagay na hindi pa natin nasusubukan. Next is justice. Justice is a virtue that enables us to render to each person that which is his or her right, what is due to each person, what each person deserves to receive. Deadly sins are also known as the 7 deadly sins. According to Roman Catholic theology, the 7 deadly sins are the 7 behavior or feelings that inspire further sin. They are typically ordered as pride, greed, gluttony, lust, sloth, envy, and anger. Pride or pagkamataas. Pride is considered the original and the most serious of the 7 deadly sin on almost every list. Sabi dito na it is the most angelical or demonic out of the 7 deadly sins. Greed or kasakiman. Greed, also known as avarice, cupidity, or covetousness, is a sin of desire like lust and gluttony. However, greed is applied to an artificial rapacious desire as well as pursuit to material possessions. Gluttony or katakawan or katakawan. Halimbawa nito ay ang mga katakawan sa pagkain, sa inumin, at sa mga kagamitan. Gluttony is described as excessive eating, drinking, and indulgence, and covers also greed. Next is lust. Lust is disordered love for individual. It is generally thought to be the least serious capital sin, as it is an abuse of faculty that humans shared with animals, and sin of the flesh are less grievous than spiritual sin. Next is sloth or katamaran. Sloth is defined as the failure to do things that one can do, or in another term is laziness. Next is envy or pagkainggit. Maaring pagkainggit sa kung anong meron sa iba or pagkainggit sa mga bagay. Envy is a sin of jealousy over the blessing and achievements of others, especially the spiritual enjoyment and advance of the kingdom of Christ, freely and gorgeously bestowed upon the people of God. As uncontrolled feeling or anger, rage, and even hatred. Wrath often reveals itself in the wish to seek revenge. In its purest form, wrath presents injury, violence, and hate that may provoke feuds that can go on for centuries. The goodwill. Goodwill is to act out of sin of moral obligation or duty. In other words, the moral agent does the particular action not because of what is produced in terms of human experience, but because the agent recognizes by reasoning that it is the morally right thing to do, and consequent there is a moral duty or obligation to do that act. Will is the faculty of acting according to a conception of law. When we act, whatever or not we achieve, what we intended with our action is often beyond our control. Morality of action does not depend upon their outcomes. It says here that we can will to act according to one law rather than other. Morality of action, therefore, must be assessed in terms of motivation behind it. Categorical imperative. That action is needed to itself objectively with one purpose. For example, if honestly is must during examination, then it has to be practiced even if negative results will compromise one's academic standards or scholarship. Rights. It is a moral power endowed to men to do or refrain from doing something that which one may be entitled. So, ang right ay ang mga legal o moral na karapatan na gumawa o umiwas sa paggawa ng isang bagay o makakuha o umiwas sa pagkuha ng isang aksyon, bagay o pagkilala sa sambayanan.
Good day, everyone. I am Ivan Labastre. Let's talk about the essential properties of rights. Number one is coaction. It's the capacity of right to forcefully prevent its violation and to exact redress for unjust violation. It is the action or a process to avoid in any injustice things in life. Coaction helps us to lessen the violation, to do more right things without any problem. Number two is limitation. Is a natural limit or boundary of right beyond which is that cannot be exercised without any violating the right of another. Limitation is really important to every individual. It helps us to set any boundaries without any violating the rights of the other. For example is teachers and students at the classroom. Teachers as a fellowships to us. Sometimes they give funny jokes to us and a lot of conversation, even it's not related to discussion. So as a student, we need to know our limitation and show some respect to them. And we need to set for our boundaries. In that way, we will having a good communication to them and good relationship to them without any problem. Next is collision. It is apparent conflict of the rights. In some instance, there is a problem between one another due to striking violently against one another. I think this is the matter between their disagreement or their beliefs to fight for their own rights. But then, we need to have a open mind to see our own mistake in some moment. And now, let's move on to the kinds of rights. Number one is natural rights. They are the rights acquired by birth, also called basic human rights. Right to life, to freedom, to obtain properties, to education. So, simula pa lang nung pinanganak tayo, ay may mga karapatan na tayo. Like to have a freedom, to have a good quality of education, living in a good life, and a lot of more. That is the basic rights na hindi na mawawala sa atin. So, simula pa lang nung pinanganak tayo, may mga parte na tayo sa ating community. So that we need to have a basic human rights for the sake of us. Next is acquired rights. Those rights obtained by individuals after fulfilling some requirements as prescribed by law. Acquisition to citizenship, right to suffrage. Okay. Some example of acquired rights is kapag nasa abroad ka na or kahit sang country pa yan na gusto mo nang doon tumira or manatili, ay kailangan mo lang magstay doon ng I think 5 years. Then after you fulfill for that, you can get your citizenship and achieve the rights that you wanted, and you can stay for a longer times. Next is public rights. Those rights given by the people by ecclesiastical by civil laws and civil laws. Public rights is relating by the Christian church or by its clergy. Public rights that given by the civil law is a system that control everything that relate to the people, to know their legal relationship, and this law is usually established by the country civil code. Next is the private rights. Those rights granted by private industries, institution, or organization who had formulated laws coordinate with the civil law. So, sa private rights are those rights entitled for every private citizen in a certain country. In short, all the information is become confidential under the private rights. And next is positive rights. Those rights which confer upon the person a power to do certain things right to marry, to possess a wealth. Ang positive right ay isang karapatan na ibinibigay sa pamamagitan ng pagkilos ng ibang tao or estado. Sa positive rights, prescribe o nangangailangan ng ilang mga aksyon upang magkaroon ka ng freedom para makapagdesisyon sa sarili or para sa kanila without any problem, kagaya ng may nasasamantala or natatapakan na karapatan ng iba. Next is negative rights. This is the power of person to refuse to perform negative acts like stealing, intoxication, drinking, killing, etc. In the negative rights, the argument goes place no obligation on you to provide a goods to other people. At gayon ay ginagalang ang iyong karapatan at napapanatili ang kapayapaan. A classic enumeration of a negative rights includes lives, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Number 7 is alienable rights. The rights that can be transferred or renounced, like ownership rights, positive and negative rights. So sa alienable rights is a right na pwedeng mabago or malipat, like titulo, but in the right process. Number 8 is inalienable rights. The rights that cannot be transferred or renounced, like religious rights or right to life. Inalienable rights, so kasulungat naman ito ng alienable rights. Ibig sabihin kung sa alienable rights ay pwedeng mabago, dito sa inalienable rights ay hindi pwedeng mabago. Halimbawa nito ang ating basic rights natin from the start na nabubuhay pa tayo, ay karapatan na natin yun. So hindi na yung mababago sa atin kasi makakarapatan na natin yun, no? Next is perfect rights. These are mandatory or enforced by the law. Right to collect payment from debt. Next. Okay. Perfect rights is a mandatory under the law. Halimbawa nito ang pagbabayad ng mga tariff and taxes na isa sa ating mga obligation as a part in a community. Next is imperfect rights. The rights which are not enforced by the law or not judicial. Right to give tips to ushers. So sa imperfect rights naman ay it is not enforced by the law. Ibig sabihin, it is not our obligation to give any tip in any moment. It is our own choice if we are going to give any tip to show some appreciation.
Limitation of rights. As a human, meron po tayong mga limitasyon. So, ganoon lang din po sa ating rights. So, bakit nga ba tayo nagkakaroon ng limitation of rights? So, number 1 is on what the natural law prescribes or allows. So, natural law are the things na hindi man sa atin ipaalala, ay palaging nakatatak sa ating isipan. So, just like, huwag kang magnanakaw, huwag kang makikiapid, huwag kang papatay. So, one of the example is that you have the right to love, pero yung taong mahal mo is meron ng asawa or meron ng kinakasama. So, although you have the right to love, syempre, importante na hindi tayo makasira ng relasyon ng iba. So, pangalawa, for every right, there is a corresponding duty that are bound to respect. So, hindi naman po tayo makikipaglaban ng wala lang. So, instead of sirain natin yung pinaglalaban ng isang tao, maybe we just need to respect them, no? For the preservation of social order. So, kung lahat po tayo ay merong pinaglalaban, kung lahat po tayo ay gustong magsalita, diba, lahat po talaga ay magkakagulo. That is why some people remain silent. Not because wala silang pakialam, but because they choose to have peace, no? And pang-apat, rights are limited because of the very limitations of man's nature. So, tulad nga po ng sinabi ko kanina, that all humans have limitations. So, lahat talaga ng bagay nagbabago, no? Maging yung mga bagay na pinaglalaban natin. Because, every day we learn something, no? Every day na nababago yung pananaw natin sa buhay, nababago yung beliefs natin. So, ganun lang din. Parang nagbabago lang din yung mga karapatan or mga tama, no, na ipinaglalaban natin. So, wag natin kakalimutan, no, that more than sa mga bagay na gusto nating ipaglaban is that maging mabuti tayong tao. We learn to respect people at hindi dapat yun mawala no matter what. So, ayun lamang po. Salamat.
Good day everyone, my name is Raymart E. Granada. And what is utilitarianism? One of the most well-known and important moral theories is utilitarianism. Its central notion, like that of other varieties of consequentialism, is that whether actions are morally justified or immoral is determined by their consequences. The only impacts of activity that matter are the positive and negative outcome that they cause. Two types of utilitarianism. First is act utilitarianism. It is a utilitarian ethical theory that maintains that person action is ethically good if and only if it achieves the best possible result in the given situation. The second one is the rule utilitarianism. The rightness or wrongness of a specific action is a consequence of the correctness of the rule of which it is an instance according to rule utilitarianism. Moral rights include the right of attribution. In general, the right of attribution is designed to give an artist control over whether and how his or her name is connected with his or her own piece of art, while the right of integrity is intended to keep an artist's work from being altered, twisted, or mutilated. The right of integrity, the creator's right to integrity, empowers him or her to object to negative treatment of his or her work, in whole or in part. The integrity right, like the right of attribution, applies to works of literature, theater, music, art, and film. Next, right of infringement. A violation, a breach, or an unlawful act constitute an infringement. Infringement arises in a variety of circumstances. An infringement occurs when one's rights are violated. A statutory violation is also an infringement. Then the last is the legal rights. A constitution, statute, rule, judicial decision, or other sort of laws confer a power or privilege to the broader population, someone's legally enforceable claim as a result of specific events or transactions. And that's all. Thank you.